Welcome back to Politicking. Robert Mueller's investigation into alleged collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russian government has consumed much of the media headlines over the last 2 years. But before Mueller, there was Ken Starr and his multi-year look into Bill and Hillary Clinton's dealings, real estate and otherwise, and that grew in time to encompass President Clinton's relationship with a White House intern. Starr's final report led to the House impeachment of Bill Clinton in 1999. But the president survived the impeachment attempt, served out his term, and remains a hugely popular world figure. Ken Starr has recently completed a book on his investigation entitled Contempt, a memoir of the Clinton investigation, and he stopped by to talk about it with me. We got into Mueller's probe and a lot of other politics, too. Here is the interview. Watch. Before we get to the book, Ken, what do you make of this ongoing Mueller investigation?
Well, I think Bob Mueller, who I know from my service alongside Bob in the administration of President Bush 41, is an honorable guy. I know him to be a person of integrity, so I think he's done extremely important work thus far. Obviously, he's had some criminal convictions. That's a sign of progress and a sign that he knows what he's doing. Also, and this gets less attention, Larry, than I think it should, the two indictments returned by the grand jury against the Russian nationals and the Russian organizations, I think is very important in providing us with very real information, real insight into how the Russians tried to sow discord and rancor, and they've certainly been doing a pretty good job of that among the American people. He's a good man.
So you don't, I guess, agree with the president calling it a witch hunt?
No, with all respect to the president, but then again, I've heard those words before. I heard them from President Clinton and certainly President Clinton's surrogates. It's all a witch hunt. And yet, as you know, Larry, because you were there, you covered so much of this, we had 14, I don't brag about this, but it's just the fact, 14 criminal convictions in Arkansas, including the sitting governor of the state. I guess most relevantly, James and Susan McDougal, who were the president and the first lady's business partners, and very importantly, they were Hillary's clients.
Should the president sit down with Mueller?
Oh, Larry, that's a tough one. There are two perspectives. There are probably more than two. The first perspective is that of the criminal defense lawyer, and the instinct is no, don't do it. The perspective I have is that of the president, being the president of the United States, sworn to uphold the law. And I believe there is a moral duty on the part of the president to cooperate with the investigation. The Clintons said they were cooperating with my investigation, and sometimes they did, but frequently they did not. Ironically, the president, President Trump, from all that appears, has been cooperating with the investigation, but at the same time he's tweeting and saying very naughty things about Bob Mueller and the investigation. So there's kind of a two-track process going on, Larry, as I see it. Cooperation on the one hand and yelling at the prosecutor on the other hand.
Ken, you said that the president would be well advised to read your book. Why?
Well, I think it has a lot to tell us in light of the echoes. For one thing, we don't know, of course, Larry, what's going to happen in the midterm elections, but there are calls for the impeachment of the president. I think this is really something that the people around the president, I think, will argue pretty effectively, is that the two presidential impeachments we have had did not go well. Andrew Johnson, back a long time ago, right after the Civil War, and then, of course, to close out the 20th century, William Jefferson Clinton. I think that there are mechanisms for the Congress to express its disapproval or disapprobation of what the president has done, short of impeachment. So my book, in part, is essentially, Larry, a note of caution. Be careful. Don't take the country through this very divisive process unless you're confident that you have a super majority of the American people, not a majority, a super majority of the American people saying, yes, that president should go.
Why did you write Contempt? What is one might say, why are we looking at this again? And I know a lot of new things are revealed, but why now?
Yeah. For one thing, Larry, we were coming up on the 20th anniversary, and I've been urged for years to write the book, that there's so much that was untold. Our serious consideration of presenting an indictment against Hillary to the Little Rock grand jury before it expired in May of 1998. My reflections on the death of Vincent Foster Jr., and then, of course, most famously, the entire Lewinsky phase, what happened on that fateful day when she told her mother who wanted her to cooperate with our investigation, that she was not going to bring down this, and she used a very explosive F-bomb word, this president down. And so I think we have a number of things that were really hidden from view. Now, people weren't hiding them, but they just weren't in the public domain. But it also seemed to me the right time, in light of our history, in light of the continuing rancor and the like, that it would be good if we could to, even if we oppose the president's policies, and I'm speaking that so many people do, they oppose the president's policies, that somehow we could move back to an era, a little bit more of an era of good feeling, the kind of era that Ronald Reagan, I served in his administration, was able, as you well know, Larry, to sit down with the Speaker of the House of Representatives from another political party, a very partisan Democrat, Tip O'Neill, and the two of them could get along with one another. They disagree, but they didn't have to yell and scream at one another.
You write that Bill and Hillary were, quote, fundamentally dishonest, contemptuous of law and process. Does Trump mask any of that to you?
I think there's some serious issues. I just dislike it profoundly when the president, any president, starts assailing federal judges. You know, judges are not above criticism. I understand that. But I do think that there needs to be a respect for law, for the legal process, and I think it needs to be shown at all times. I don't think the president has shown respect for the legal process in his attacks on the Attorney General and Jeff Sessions. Whether you agree with Jeff Sessions or you don't disagree with him. I wrote an editorial, Larry, over a year ago, and the headline was pretty accurate. Cut it out, Mr. President. Now, I voted for the president, and I want him to succeed. But I think that some of the things he does is just erodes the rule of law. And I'm a rule of law guy.
Would you have written contempt if Hillary Clinton were president?
It would have been a harder call, Larry. One of the reasons that I did write it is that she lost the election, and my personal circumstances were such that I had more freedom to step back and remember this. But I want my president to succeed. I may not agree with the president, who happens to be in power. There were many things about President Obama that I very much disagreed with, but I want my president to succeed. I want our country to succeed. So I don't know if I would have said, okay, you need to now write this story when she was to be the duly elected president. It would have been a harder call, Larry.
You mentioned Brett Kavanaugh several times in the book, describing him as a key member, a chief wordsmith of the Independent Counsel brain trust. Some people were taken aback by his behavior before the committee. Tell me about Kavanaugh. What is he like? What do you think of him as a jurist?
He's almost like a son to me, or perhaps I should say a younger brother. He's 53 years old, but I am old enough to be his father. Brett Kavanaugh is a person of integrity. And I know these were serious charges that Dr. Ford made. I've worked with Brett since he was coming off the clerkship with Justice Kennedy, not since he's been a judge, of course. And Larry, he's an honest guy. He's a good person. And, you know, honest and good people can do bad things. But he said, and he emphatically denied, that he was the assailant, the person in high school who did this horrible, horrible thing. And having worked with him day in and day out, and then year in and year out, and also just watching him in the office, there is not a hint of impropriety, of some sort of Harvey Weinstein kind of action, or Bill Cosby kind of action. Just a gentleman, a real gentleman. And so my heart went out to everyone involved in this. But I believe Brett Kavanaugh, and I think he's going to be a great justice.
Do you think that if the Democrats get the House, they might file impeachment proceedings against Trump?
Well, Larry, there's a lot of talk about that, but I'm very thankful that some of the wise and more experienced folks in the party are saying, no, we're just not going to go there. So I hope not. And my book, Larry, is really, as I said a few minutes ago, is really, in effect, I'll now use the term, a cautionary tale. Our nation does not like impeaching the President of the United States. We just don't. We don't like overturning elections. So have a full and fair election. We're going to have midterms. Then in 2020, we'll have an election of, or perhaps, if President Trump runs, you'll have the opportunity to pass judgment on him. But I think that's one of the things the founding generation felt strongly about is we want stability in our government, and therefore the requirement of a 2/3 majority, Larry, for removing the president. It only takes a simple majority, as we all know, to impeach, but it takes a supermajority to actually remove the president. And I think what the founding generation was telling us, we want a national consensus in order to remove a president from office.
All sides of the political spectrum, by the way, have praised this book. The book is Contempt, a memoir of the Clinton investigation. Ken, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Larry.